Hey friends, Geoffrey Woo here, and welcome to a special episode of the HVMN podcast. Today marks the relaunch of HVMN's Performance Supplements, our nutrition supplement products to support brain and body function. For listeners who've been with us from the start, which is over 2 years ago, you remember HVMN as NutriBox with our original nootropic products Rise, Keto-3, Sprint, and Yawn. This relaunch today marks the transformation of NutriBox into HVMN. It's a culmination of over a year and a half of research and development across our organization, of really rebuilding the performance supplement space from the grounds up. To discuss these upgrades, I'm joined by HVMN's research lead, Dr. Brianna Stubbs, to dive into the research, thought process, and nuances behind the new formulations that make up our new performance supplements. If you're tuning in via audio, remember to hit that subscribe button for weekly episodes. For folks watching on YouTube, please subscribe as well. But also hit that bell next to the red subscribe button. YouTube isn't perfect and doesn't always notify you when we post a video, so click on that bell to not miss out. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Great to have you back on the program officially, Brianna.
Thanks very much. It's exciting to be here with all the fancy red lights and the little bottles of human ketone. So it's good. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I think our audience and our community misses your voice here because I know that some of our conversations are some of the actual most popular episodes. So
now, are you sure it's not just because I have a British accent? I was in the airport yesterday and they tried to keep me at the check-in desk because they just wanted to hear me talk British to them.
Hey, maybe take advantage of it. I mean, it's definitely in the American context, definitely some plus points. In terms
50
of
extra IQ points just for being British.
Yeah. So, perhaps, there's a lot of things we can talk about, but one of the big things that we're working on and have been working on, and we're proud to talk about today, is the relaunch of our nootropics or performance supplements. And we originally designed the Rise, Keto-3, Sprint, Yawn under the brand name of NutriBox. And obviously, over the last 2 years, we've evolved that to HVMN and really increased our scope of our business and our mission to increase all of human performance, not just cognitive performance. And let's talk about all the stuff that we've learned in terms of hard-won experience in clinical, application studies and feedback to all the latest science coming out of the peer-reviewed literature. A lot of things that we've taken and absorbed and now are going to be reflecting into the new human performance HVMN supplements line.
Yeah. I'm really proud to have been part of this update process. I think it says a lot for the company that we're always looking at the new evidence and trying to make the best products that we can based on all of the available evidence and the feedback. So I'm excited to have come in and seen where they were and then been part of just fine tuning and improving and excited to see what people think.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the biggest advantages that we as a group of folks working in this space is that I would say over the last year and a half, 2 years, we've really been lucky to work with top performers in the athletic world and the military world. And that's given us an inside look into how they think about nutrition, supplements, and what they think are promising avenues of research and targets of what they're focused on.
Yeah, I think it means a lot when you can speak to top-level operators, as you say, in athletics and in the military, and they're using something and seeing benefits for them. It's sometimes when you read a paper, I always like to look at science as it's kind of like bricks in a wall, a little like we have behind us here. And so it depends what, sometimes it can seem a little confusing when there's positive studies or studies with big effects and small effects. And it can get confusing to really tease out what's going on. But I think seeing validation from the highest levels and trusted sources gives you a lot of confidence to make changes and move forwards.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I've personally absorbed, which is that there is one level of evidence in the randomized controlled trial literature, right? And I think even in the messy, creation of science, there's sometimes conflicting data or conflicting bodies of evidence, and it's hard to tease out. But I think the things that have the most effect will tease out over time in terms of having just a statistic significance over a number of studies.
Sure. It's definitely important. Yeah. And, one of our principles as a company has always been to have that peer-reviewed evidence. You can't just go on anecdote. There has to be a good body of of science there. But then when you've got, several things and the science is all kind of, you could pick or choose, it's hard to pick or choose, then going to see what's actually happening in the field is really, really valuable.
Yeah. Like in field, what's being used, what are people seeing at the highest levels of performance, what's working for them. And like, I think, and that's our job as people that create products to collate the randomized controlled trial data, what's happening in application, in field use, and then collating all the bodies of, all the signals and really cutting out the noise and making something that I think we can all be proud of.
And I think, there's been a lot of attention to detail that's always gone into the products and that's gone into this refresh, like really looking at, I think with plant extracts, it's something that I've never had to deal with human ketone. It's like with plant extracts, you can have different potencies and different sources. And so really, working and as with the whole team and with the people who make the products to ensure that we get the best quality ingredients and those that match the potencies that have been used in the clinical trials. So I think it's, being thoughtful and selecting just a few key ingredients for each nootropic that we really think works, and then making sure that for each of those that we're using exactly the correct dose or within the correct dosing range, and that the extracts themselves are of a really good quality. Because I think, looking at the space broadly, there can be products that have 42 or, I think we were looking at an example this morning. There was a product that has 42 ingredients and it's like, wow, that's a lot. How's that all going to interact? Is that all going to be at the right dosage? Are they going to be good quality ingredients if you can afford it? There's a lot of considerations into designing something kind of thoughtfully to the highest level of integrity, to be as close as possible to what we know works from the literature.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good point in terms of like the multifactorial combinations of all these different components, right? Like you literally have an exponential increase of interactions between each specific ingredient or component. And I think we've always been focused on, okay, what is the minimum amount of intervention that's effective, kind of, right? Like that's just a simpler, cleaner physiological thing to understand and study and show data behind. I think you bring up a good point around botanicals, where if we're talking about, root extracts or leaf extract, plants have variation, right? If you have a plant that's growing in the summer versus in the fall in a different weather pattern, are the concentrations of the active ingredient different? And the answer is yes.
But not even that. There's even different, like sort of almost like subspecies of plants. So for example, ginseng, there's American ginseng and Asian ginseng. So there's like, you can't just look at ginseng, you have to look at the specific type that you're going to use, for example. And I use that as an example because that's one of the things that we'll discuss later that we've added into one of our products. But there's a lot to kind of try and be aware of as a consumer.
And I think just to highlight before talking specifics, I would just recommend for anyone looking at just broad botanicals, make sure there's a standardized extract, meaning that there's a percentage of the active components of said botanical or adaptogen that has been studied in peer-reviewed trials. Where that means it'll be a little bit more expensive. It means that the component is tested to some standard extract potency and not just they picked some leaves off of a farm, ground it up, and put it into a pill. There's actually a baseline potency that we're guaranteeing in our products that we batch test before the product goes into production and before it leaves the production line into our bottles and into your doorsteps. Cool. Anything else in terms of just high-level things that have informed us as we're thinking about this upgrade and this refresh?
Well, I think you kind of hit on it earlier, sort of the shift in the company mission from being more, exclusively focused on the brain to being focused on physical performance as well as part of like the human system, physical and cognitive performance. So that was definitely something that we had in mind as we looked at the amounts of compound and the different types of compound that we were putting in.
Yeah.
We wanted, we see ourselves as, helping people be their best selves. And we know, appreciate more and more that actually physical activity is a huge part of that. And, us now supplying elite athletes with human ketone, we want, our aspiration is that the human performance supplements can be part of their routine as well.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. So let's dive into each of the new products that we're refreshing. Let's start with Rise. So Rise is our original product, our daily nootropic. It's something that I take every single day, and it's really exciting to see it'd still be one of our most popular products. Some of our loyal customers of Rise have been with us for 3-4 years now, which is amazing. Thanks so much for really the long-term trust and support. So perhaps the way we should talk about the upgrade is look at exactly what the change log is. Let's just talk about what we kept the same and what we've upgraded.
So previously, Rise was Bacopa Monnieri, Rhodiola Rosie. Is that how you pronounce it? Rosea, and Alpha GPC.
Yeah.
So we've kept the backbone of Rise as Bacopa Monnieri. We're like really, really bullish around that as a nootropic. And the changes come.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Bacopa a little bit before talking about each of the changes. I think just we've had individual episodes talking specifically about the data here, but one to reference is a conversation I had with Professor Constall in Australia, who's one of the leading public researchers on Bacopa. Really strong data in terms of improving long-term memory formation over sustained supplementation, and a lot of the data that I am increasingly excited about is the data behind how Bacopa increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic brain-derived neurotrophic factor production, which, especially with our work with ketone esters and how that impacts the brain, is a very key mechanism on not just the performance side, but also potentially some of the recovery, traumatic brain injury side of things.
Yeah. So I think that was definitely always going to be a keeper, the clinical evidence there. I think it's quite unusual that you get a plant extract being studied for basic science, like the experiment you just described. So I think we should expect to see more findings around Bacopa coming out if more people are using it like this.
Yeah, and then I think one of the things that we've always been really a stickler about is having a really high potency in terms of the extract potency. So it's a 50% bacicides extract, which is very, very high. Most Bacopa products you see out there are either unstandardized or have 15-20% bacicides. So people that are really looking to get a potent dose of Bacopa, make sure you look at the bacicides extract rating and make sure you're getting a high potency Bacopa.
Yeah. So the first major change is that we decided that we would swap out rhodiola for ashwagandha. So they're both adaptogens, which means that they have an effect on fatigue and anxiety. So in that sort of aspect, they're kind of similar. But there's some good evidence around ashwagandha for not only the sort of subjective feelings of anxiety, but also around objective measures such as serum cortisol and the immune response to stress as well. So really looking in detail at those two compounds, it was sort of like there seems to be more data around objective biomarker measures than we could find for rhodiola. Another thing that we were interested in was some effects on physical performance as well. So long-term supplementation with Bacopa has been shown to help improve not only muscle strength, but also
ashwagandha.
Sorry, what did I say? Bacopa, ashwagandha, sorry. Long-term supplementation with ashwagandha has been shown to improve muscle strength, but also sprinting and VO2 max capabilities as well. So we were really, really excited by this data and thought that this would be a great way to get the adaptogen effect that we were kind of previously looking to build in with rhodiola, as well as some physical performance metric changes as well.
Yeah.
And, to go back to what we were saying at the very start of the conversation, ashwagandha was something that came up time and time again when we were talking to some of our athlete and military partners and at some of these meetings. So when we started to dig into the science there, it was a strong ingredient. We definitely wanted to build that into Rise.
Yeah, I think that's like the right way to look at it. I think the totality of evidence behind both rhodiola and ashwagandha, they're solid adaptogens. But I would say that like the entire totality of evidence suggests that ashwagandha will just be a better upgrade, where we get a lot of the anti-fatigue adaptogenic effects of rhodiola, but with some of the added benefit of the VO2 max and the muscle performance with ashwagandha, which is exciting. And I think that as more and more of these things have objective biological biomarkers like the what you're mentioning with cortisol
and the immune
response, you as a physiologist and me, getting more and more practical experience in the space here, those are just good, core mechanisms of how these things work. And the more we know the core physiological response, it tends to be we just understand as product makers how these things work, which gives a lot more confidence that the end efficacy will be good.
Yeah, because ultimately, we always talk about the body as a system, and you've got your pill of Rise, and you're going to take it in, and you want to eliminate as much of the black box in between you popping your Rise pill and then you feeling less fatigued or you performing better cognitively. If we can understand the mechanisms, measuring an effect is, P1, and that's really, really important, and it's great. But if we can understand how that effect is happening, then that's even more powerful. So actually being able to measure some objective biomarkers is like another solid layer of, conviction around that ingredient.
100%. So just re-emphasize the extract potency. The ashwagandha that will be in the new Rise is a 10% ashwagandha extract, and the active ingredient there is with phenolides. And it's made by Sensoril, which is a brand name that's really well respected in the space of ashwagandha. So a very high quality ashwagandha source. But folks that are still excited about, and I think this could be good reason for rhodiola, make sure that you look at the salidroside and rosamin content of a potential rhodiola supplement. The old Rise had a 5% salidroside, 2% rosamin content, and again, I would focus on things that have higher and specific extracts for the active ingredients behind these botanicals.
People can always go and look up all of the data, all of the studies, because they'll be shared on the HVMN website and our library. So if people are interested in around the studies that have been done using rhodiola and they want to go and look and see what potencies and what extracts were used in those studies, that even though rhodiola is no longer in Rise, all of that information will still be there, so people can go and use it as a resource.
100%. And the last component upgrade for Rise, we went from the last component has always been a choline source. And choline is an important precursor to acetylcholine,
and
which
also
is a neurotransmitter for memory and learning.
Yeah. And also it's a key component of lipid, the phospholipid bilayer in the neurons in the brain.
Yeah. So basically, choline sources have always been important for brain health and brain function. And it's always been important as a nootropic to have a choline source. The major change we made here was we replaced the choline source from alpha GPC to cytocholine. So let's talk about some of the thinking there and what the universe of choline supplements are. So perhaps just to start from like what the most popular supplements are, there's the cheapest choline supplement, which is Choline Bitartrate, which is quite cheap. And the reason it's cheap is that it's a pretty low density form of delivering choline in terms of like the percentage weight. So you need to eat a lot of choline bitartrate to get this similar amount of actual choline delivered into your system. So alpha GPC and cytocholine are a lot more expensive in terms of just the component cost, because the choline percentage per weight of CDP, choline, and alpha GPC is much higher. Now, do you want to unpack the thinking and the data behind alpha GPC versus cytocholine?
Yeah. And I just want to point out to the listeners that you called it CDP choline a second ago, and then also citicholine. And so those names both refer to the same thing, the same sort of structural molecule. But when it's produced by the body, we call it CDP choline. And when we get it from a bottle, it's citicholine. So they're kind of, it's more a reference as to where it's come from, but they're the same structure. Again, we kind of just took a step back and we did like a broad search of the literature and thought really about what we wanted. And we were really keen to find one of these two compounds that had been tested in young adults, because a lot of choline sources have been trialed as sort of preventative measures for dementia. So a lot of the studies and the bigger studies have all been done in aging populations. So we went and really were looking for things that had been done in young, healthy adults. And we came across a few very, very promising and good quality studies using citicholine, again, a branded extract that's called Cognizin, which I believe is the one we're using in Rise. So seeing these results really excited us, and we felt that because the mechanism was conserved, we would want to go with something that had, good clinical peer-reviewed evidence around the people who are likely to be using it, so younger people.
Right. And I would say that the original thinking behind alpha GPC was that alpha GPC has a higher per weight delivery of choline versus cytocholine. But what I think what you're referring to is that there is just more published research on young adult use of acetylcholine showing benefit than alpha GPC.
Yeah, it may be something to do with the structure of the molecule. I mean, so it's possible, as you were saying earlier, there may be some benefits to having uridine.
Yeah, the uridine is part of CDP choline, so uridine also has some early data suggesting that's beneficial for cognitive performance. So I think in totality, you have both very good choline sources for the brain, but the added benefit of having some uridine and actually having some data published on young, healthy adults versus just an aging population was going to be more, I think, representative of the use cases of what we wanted Rise to be, which is cognitive improved, an enhancer for not just old people.
We make products that we want to use ourselves.
Yeah, for people like us as well.
And, I think something that's really focused our minds in the last year is bringing in the human evidence grading system for all of the claims that we're making. So if you go on our website, you'll see that we've ranked every claim that we make about the products 1 through 5 to indicate the strength of the evidence, whether that's just sort of theoretical evidence all the way through to like a trial of the product as you're buying it. And so, we're really challenging ourselves to make the products have the highest evidence grading possible. And so I think, when I was looking at alpha GPC, I think it was sort of tossing up between, it was probably a solid 3 out of 5. It's like early efficacy of evidence. And then we wanted to really be able to say, no, this is a 4, this ingredient at this amount has been studied in humans and shown to be effective for the exact thing that we're saying. Yeah. So I think that's been a really good like North Star for us as we've done this upgrade to try and be able to give the products the best evidence grading possible.
Yeah, we don't take the upgrades lightly. And we've been piloting early beta batches of this new Rise in the office and through some of our early beta customers, and the feedback has been really, really awesome. So excited to roll it out properly to everyone, very, very soon. I'm excited about it. It's a mainstay. It's our original product, right? So we don't take changes lightly, and I hope that we're all, the listeners and our customers out there are proud of the work that we put into this new upgraded version of Rise.
Yeah, it's been a lot of time and a lot of discussion. So I think we all feel really good about it and excited to hear what everyone has to say.
Yeah, let's talk about our next product, Keto 3, our Omega Health Kit product.
I love Keto. So the first change is that it's no longer Keto 3. It's just going to be called Keto.
Okay.
So I don't know why we decided to drop the 3 because the ingredient omega 3 is still in there. Yeah. But I think that's more of a making it look pretty kind of decision. But
so just to give a sense of why it's even called Keto 3. I mean, it's basically a amalgamation of the vitamin K, the astaxanthin or the antioxidant component, the vitamin D, and then omega 3, and jam it all together as Keto 3. But we're calling it Keto now.
It's now called Keto. It's one of my favorite products that we do. I think that everyone can be benefiting from supplementing omega-3s, vitamin D and vitamin K. It's very, very commonly deficient, not only because of our diets being low in omega-3s, but also in our lifestyle. For example, we normally can make vitamin K from exposure to sunlight and
vitamin D.
Vitamin D. Yeah. I know that. I just had a model there. Typically now, working more and more indoors, we don't necessarily have enough, and the recommendations for supplementation just to get us up to what the industry what health people consider as normal, it's still kind of on the low side. So there's no danger from kind of topping vitamin D up above what the recommended norm should be. In fact, most people probably should be higher than the recommended norm. So I think this is like a really great product that people can be building into their kind of regular routine. And previously we used to speak about it a lot in terms of its effects on the brain, but it was just so easy to start thinking about it in the bigger picture of the company mission and how it's going to be helpful for people also trying to optimize their physical performance as well.
But I would even say, like, let's focus on the brain for a little bit. I mean, I think we were just at a nutrition summit with some of the best performers in both athletics and military, and still a lot of ongoing research with omega-3s, DHA especially, for traumatic brain injury, concussion, cognitive performance. So it's not just us kind of being happy with the state of science behind omega-3, DHA, EPA, but it's a very active area of research. And of course, as folks that are in the military or playing in the NFL, for example, I mean, that's a huge area of concern. How do we keep people healthy and happy and have long productive lives, after they're out retire from the field.
Yeah, certainly all of the components in keto are not only mechanistically but in randomized controlled trials as well shown to contribute to overall brain health. So I think that's we were always confident about that from when the product was designed, and that's that still stands now, which is why we've made very, very few changes to this product.
But I think you're going to talk about like the broader
effects on athletic performance
and
as
just metabolic health. And I think the data there is just getting more and more convincing. I mean, I think the whole omega-6 story with vegetable oils, not just being just kind of a strange source of fat. If you think about it, like vegetables don't really have fat, like it's really like an industrial process to actual make vegetable oils, and vegetable oils are very, very high in terms of omega-6.
And those
seeing that data there as being like detrimental to metabolic health is really scary.
Because ultimately, these unsaturated fatty acids are being incorporated into our cell membranes. So they're being built into the very fabric of your body. And so if you've got these very artificial fats that are ending up in your cell membranes, they're going to affect the very, very basic things around how the cell can like move and interact with other cells.
Right.
So trying to cut back on omega-6s and processed vegetable oils and making sure that you have enough omega-3s is just really, really important. And I'd encourage the listeners to actually go back, and you and I had a conversation about omega-3s that people can find out a little bit more about the science there.
Yeah.
It's not just the brain, it is the whole body, and it really has impacts on cardiovascular health as well. And I mean, some of that also comes from because once these lipids are built into the cell membrane, they can be chopped up to form signaling molecules like pro-inflammatory signaling molecules, which omega-6s are more likely to be cleaved in a way that forms something that actually even promotes inflammation versus anti-inflammatory molecules. Whereas if you've got omega-3s, they are cleaved in that way. It's more anti-inflammatory. So the balance of inflammation, pro and anti-inflammatory signals is very much affected by the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 in your cells and in your diet. And that's been shown, as you kind of alluded to have big impacts on cardiovascular health, metabolic health, say, for example, diabetes. So very, very broad impacts here throughout the body. And actually, one thing that we picked up on a meeting recently was actually that not only can omega-3 fats be cleaved to anti-inflammatory mediators, they can actually be cleaved into pro-resolving. So not only is it going to stop inflammation, but it's actually going to kind of fix inflammation. These little molecules called SPM, specialized pro-resolving mediators. So that's certainly something that people could be looking out for in the future as we start to understand how the fats in our diet can affect every process throughout our body.
100%. Yeah. I think we might have heard of omega-3s for the last 20 years or so, but it's still very, very cutting edge research, something we're excited about.
Yeah,
I think whole story.
I think people can get kind of fatigued because I mean, and even as a scientist, I get kind of fatigued because every other month it's like, new study shows omega-3s work, new study shows omega-3s don't work. And much like the plant extracts, there's kind of considerations into the source of the omega-3s, the dose of the omega-3s. There's a lot of considerations.
What endpoints are they studying?
Yeah, there's just a lot out there. But I'd say that in terms of looking at the mechanisms, and also there's no risk profile with taking them. It's very and the body of evidence that is positive, I would say it's like a very, very good bet for people. It's better than a good bet.
Yeah, it's a daily staple for both of us. I mean, I think it's
we pop keto like candy here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got to do like the macro dose version, because I think we were fully bought into the omega-3, omega-6 story.
Yeah. I take 6 keto some days.
Yeah, so like a month pack is like a week pack for us.
Yeah.
So if people are like doing that with us, maybe we'll have to consider like a macro pack for the
big users.
For the big users.
But so, I mean, obviously all over brain health, metabolic health, but then also thinking about athletes as well. A lot of the ingredients in keto are really excellent for athletes. Omega-3, we got really excited around the research looking at muscle soreness and recovery after exercise. So there's some good evidence there showing that making sure that you've got enough omega-3s can help you recover and feel less sore and able to train the next day. And that comes back to inflammation, which I was just discussing. So that's great. And then also vitamin D, the blood level of vitamin D shows some correlation to overall like muscle strength. So making sure that you have sufficient vitamin D is going to be really important if you're working out a lot. So we were excited and to be able to really speak to that as we roll out the new look product.
Yeah. So the only change we made was that we've actually doubled our astaxanthin content from 1 milligram to 2.
Yes. So basically, we looked at the peer-reviewed studies of astaxanthin in humans, and we felt that the dose was on the low end of that range, and we wanted to up it so that it was more commensurate with what had been studied.
Yeah. So strictly better in terms of increasing dosage of a fairly bespoke and expensive ingredient. So excited about making that change and offering that to everyone. Any other thoughts around keto? I mean, I think it's just like it's a good product, and I think one of the things that like isn't really talked about is that we do a little special processing with a little bit of mint oil. So instead of having fishy burps typically with the omega-3 products, it's actually a nice touch that people have commented about. We don't really market it or talk about it too much, but it's something that I appreciate, where it's like I'm not getting fish burps. I have like a little bit of a minty fresh
People
breath.
should try it themselves.
Yeah, try it out. Hey guys, Jeff jumping in here real quick before we move on and talk about the changes in Sprint. If you want to try 1 month supply of the new keto on the house, all you have to do is write a review on iTunes and send a screenshot of that review to podcast@hvmn.com. If you've written a review before, share this episode on your social channels, Twitter, Facebook, etc. Send us a screenshot, same email, and we'll hook you up. There will be a reminder of this offer at the end of the episode, so no rush. Let's get back into it. Our third HVMN Performance Supplement, Sprint. Let's talk about Sprint.
So really, previously, the backbone of Sprint was the caffeine and theanine.
Yeah.
And so previously, there were also B vitamins and tyrosine in there. And we decided we'd go back to building around that backbone of caffeine and theanine.
Almost like going back to the basics, right? I think we talked about just like focus on things that were simple, strong evidence, and like not worry about too much interactions between different components. And just, as the name Sprint implies, this is something that's an acute nootropic. You use it right before something that you want to have intense focus or energy towards.
And I think what's a real strength of Sprint is that it's got an exact known amount of caffeine and theanine in it. If you're trying to get these stimulants through coffee, there was a great research study once done, I can't remember. I think it must have been published peer-reviewed, and they went to Starbucks on like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and ordered the same drink and then looked at the caffeine content of the drink. And there's this huge variation.
Like 200 to 400 milligrams.
So you don't know what you're getting when you drink a cup of coffee. And I mean, I love drinking a cup of coffee. So there's a time and a place for things like Sprint. But when you really want to know what you're getting, and especially for athletes, because actually drinking coffee, especially if you're going to go and do a race like first thing in the morning, it can cause like GI issues there. So being able to just have caffeine without the hot liquid and the coffee and more portable is certainly a strength of having a pill form of caffeine.
Yeah. So the new Sprint is going to have 200 milligrams of caffeine, 200 milligrams of L-theanine, and 400 milligrams of Panax ginseng.
Yeah, so we decided I think previously there was more caffeine than theanine.
We did actually a 1-to-2 ratio of caffeine to L-theanine.
There was twice as much
L-theanine to caffeine.
I think we wanted to up the caffeine content because we'd had feedback from people that most people were using more than 100 mgs of, or typically targeting more than 100 mgs of caffeine.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. I think that's interesting. I think that perhaps the caffeine resistance or caffeine tolerance of people has gone up in our over caffeinated world. So our sense from some of the feedback was that the ratio of L-theanine to caffeine was artificially high now because people's resistance or dependency or tolerance of caffeine was much higher. So like the end effect of caffeine being a stimulant with L-theanine being more of an anxiolytic kind of attenuated the effects of Sprint in that 1-to-2 caffeine L-theanine ratio.
This was definitely a feedback consideration because really, you could look at, there's a huge body of literature looking at the effects of caffeine on cognition, and 100 mgs has been studied and 200 mgs has been studied. And, so there wasn't like a clear, we must go for one of these two doses.
Right.
So really it was based on listening to what people who use Sprint wanted when they wanted to feel when they use Sprint. And I think that the feeling was that they wanted to feel more of the kind of caffeine kick.
Right.
Hence why we decided that we would increase the amount of caffeine.
Right.
That was included.
Yeah, and I think the ROCT data, and there's been a lot of studies with the 1-to-2 ratio, but a lot of studies on the 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, we did. We looked at the ratio as well, and it was a pretty even split. We know that caffeine and theanine pair have some complementary kind of interactions, and so again, there was no clear winner as to whether we should be doing the 1-to-2 or the 1-to-1.
Right.
And so then we felt good about giving the customer what they wanted in terms of the science still kind of agreeing with that.
Yeah. And then the last big change about it, so we got rid of the tyrosine, the B12, the B complex, inositol, some of these components, and we decided to focus a lot of the ancillary ingredients around Panax ginseng. Why?
So we decided to focus on Panax ginseng because of a really good body of evidence around its effects on cognition and immunity as well. So I actually reached out to one investigator that had run a lot of the early studies of Panax ginseng because, having read, you always get a little bit you want to gut check things when there is 4 or 5 papers all from the same research group. You want to really see, not only get their opinion because obviously they worked with it quite closely, but just to check there's no bias or anything coming in. So I reached out and I had a good chat with the guy who ran a lot of these studies on Panax ginseng, and we discussed about the different types of ginseng and also the different potencies of ingredients and why he thought he got the results that they did. And ultimately, I was convinced that this was a really good move in for Sprint. The evidence is good around cognitive performance there. So and definitely also we were looking at some of the sort of forums and seeing what other people out there are using, and ginseng came up a lot. So
there's also some preliminary data how this is potentially good for insulin resistance,
lowering blood glucose.
Yeah, so
he said that was the investigator I spoke to said that was a pretty consistent effect of that they saw with their studies.
Yeah, so it just seemed it's a little bit different from the traditional Sprint use case of an acute nootropic, but some of the cognitive effects. And just the broader metabolic implications of something like reducing blood sugar can all be very sensible to make a very simple story around Sprint.
So another little thing that I quite like about Panax ginseng is the effects on mood. So I mean, ultimately with Sprint, we want to have people alert, but also not super wired, kind of relaxed. And one effect that was kind of consistently seen in some of these clinical trials of Panax ginseng was calmness, tranquility, not quite reduced anxiety in the same way that we talk about it with Rise, but improved subjective sense of well-being. Right. And actually a study looked at quite long-term use of Panax ginseng on overall quality of life scores and saw an improvement there. So I think that, if we're trying to design something that gets people in the ideal flow state to get something done, then feeling good about yourself, that's another good little thing that we can add to the list.
Yeah, and it might sound fuzzy, but these are measurable quantitative markers. This is on some spectrum, people are marking and seeing statistically significant differences in subjective mood.
So we remember we were talking about with ashwagandha, the subjective feeling of fatigue and then also stress, and then looking at cortisol. With subjective well-being and mood, there's not quite yet the same like good biomarkers yet. And maybe we'll get there in the future. Maybe we'll figure out something to measure in the blood that's like correlated with how good people feel about themselves. Or maybe we'll be able to more accurately measure like EEGs or some kind of correlate with mood.
Right.
But at the moment, as you say, this is subjective, but often these questionnaires are validated and used multiple times in lots of different studies. So at least there's some consistency. That was a good thing about these studies looking at Panaxion, saying that they're using validated clinical
it's a standard
scales.
validated method.
Yeah.
And I think that more and more of the psychobiological phenomenon that is becoming more and more popularized within the sports science world, right? How one feels is very important in terms of how one ultimately performs.
So important. I mean, I don't want to say like the placebo effect, but like the effect of the brain on the whole body, kind of almost like the placebo effect of taking anything is super, super, super powerful.
Right.
So, even techniques like positive self-affirmation, and if you get in or meditation, all of these things that people are talking about that sound kind of woo-woo, you're actually changing the way you think and change your physiology. So making sure that you're in a good mood, and if there's anything that you can take that will help with that, then that's going to be give you multiply the returns that you get in terms of performance.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think the way I'm going to use the new Sprint is like similar to what you're saying. Sometimes I like that nice cappuccino when it's like more of a low key, coffee meeting or a coffee date or whatnot. But for a good flow state thing, Sprint is just a much simpler, punchy, quick thing to get going there.
Yeah, and I think I'm probably going to be using it before my races. So I sit there, I'll have human ketone, some Sprint, some nice carb drink, pop the whole lot, and then I'll be like off into the distance. 5 hours later, peel me off the finish line.
With a gold medal around your neck, hopefully. And then the last HVMN performance supplement, Yawn. Another more quieter, but one of our more popular products.
Again, I personally love Yawn, especially like traveling backwards and forwards between the US and home in the UK, and then recently been doing like some East-West Coast travel, and I always travel with Yawn. And one of the things, when I was an athlete, I used other more like kind of medical kind of like sleeping aids, and whenever I take anything like that, the next morning would just be kind of like a write-off. And that was always it was always funny because I'd be trading it off. So it'd be like the night before like a big race, and I'd be like, right, I'm really, really nervous and I can't sleep, but if I take this and my race is at 9, am I prepared to accept the fact that
I might be groggy?
I might be groggy, and I'm going to really have to like caffeine up, or is the nerves going to get me up enough in the morning? So it was definitely always like a bit of a toss up and a consideration. But with Yawn, I never really feel groggy in the morning. It just feels like more of a natural kind of sleep. I think the anti-anxiety effects of, say, the L-theanine, which is one of the ingredients in Yawn, helps you just fall off to sleep, and then the next morning you wake up feeling really refreshed. And that's actually, I've given Yawn to a number of my friends out here, and a lot of people agree that's like one of the best sleeping aids that they've used. So a lot of love for Yawn. So we've made a few, really only one minor tweak to Yawn.
Minor tweak, but I think we also expanded the use case where we used to only sell them in 10 packs, but now we have Yawn in a month pack where it's, completely safe and great to use on a daily basis to support sleep. I think just to reemphasize like the importance of sleep, I think we talk a lot about things on the almost on the margin in terms of improving performance, but the basics really are good sleep, getting some reasonable amount of physical exercise, and eating a reasonable diet.
I really would be excited to hear you guys do a podcast about sleep. There's a really good book that's just come out that my running coach has recommending to me that I want to read. And when I was looking at some of the stuff we were talking about with Yawn, I was looking at some of the literature around sleep and physical performance and sleep and cognitive performance. And sleep is just huge. Like you really got to get your sleep right. Not only for circadian rhythms as well, so metabolic health as well as just how you perform. So I think it's something that we all can control, but it quite easily gets eroded with, screen time in the evening and packed out days, and it's hard to de-stress. And there's a lot of things that stop us from getting sleep, but really,
we could do a sleep podcast because I have a pretty interesting setup with completely blacked out bedroom windows and all that stuff.
It would be kind of interesting to poll how different people
try to optimize.
Optimize their sleep, because I think everyone's got, I think it's easy to listen to people giving advice and be like, oh, I could never do that. But there's something out there that works for everyone. And I think most people could get better sleep than they do.
Yeah.
So we want people to be able to use yawn every day.
But again, let's go down to the ingredient list. So yawn consists of melatonin, magnesium glycinate, glycine, L-theanine.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's start with the L-theanine. And the L-theanine, as we've already talked about it a little with Sprint. L-theanine is an anxiolytic, so it helps to reduce anxiety. So as you're trying to get ready for sleep, the last thing you want is, worries and anxiety kind of like buzzing around. And so the effect of L-theanine is to help to calm that. Glycine and magnesium given together increases the bioavailability of the magnesium. Firstly, magnesium helps with neurotransmission around sleep, and glycine, I hope I'm going to get this right. It's a precursor to a neurotransmitter again.
Yeah. So a lot of good data, especially out of Japan, showing that glycine improves subjective wellness or subjective sleep quality scores.
Yeah. No, I remember the studies now. I've been in the process of reviewing all of these, so it's kind of at the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
And then finally, melatonin.
Yeah.
And this is the more kind of, I think for me, it's kind of a more interesting ingredient because I think it's over in the UK, it's regulated. So I think in America, you can buy melatonin supplements. I'm not sure that you can in the same way over in the UK. I'm not sure. But certainly, when you look out there at what you can get, there's a big old range in the amounts of melatonin that you can buy. Anything from what was previously in yawn, which was, very small amount, like 300 micrograms, all the way up through to, 5, 10 milligrams.
Which is, way too much.
Just like a horse tranquilizer, right? So some of the feedback from customers, we'd previously chosen this very, very low level of yawn because of some work done that showed that in this work anyway, that there was very little difference in terms of the sleep promoting abilities that,
between 300 and 1 milligram.
Yes. But then the customer feedback that we were getting from yawn was that people were not feeling a super strong sleep inducing effect. Which, maybe worked fine for, say, me, because I don't normally have any sleep problems, but maybe the type of people that were using yawn were really looking for something that made them feel sleepy and drowsy in much the same way that the people that were looking for Sprint were looking for more of a kick. So we decided that we would go to the upper range of what had been found to be non-habit forming.
Yeah.
So again, looked through, there's been a lot of studies of ascending melatonin dose and then any rebound effects after that, and also, again, drowsiness the following morning. And so we decided that 1 milligram was a good compromise, where we felt good that people could take it every day and felt good that, that should increase the chance that people feel the effects of the melatonin.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the most important thing as a consumer. I don't want anything that's habit forming. And the dose of 1 milligram is non-habit forming. You see the same rebound or the same natural release of melatonin under that threshold. So people out there that are listening, when you look at melatonin supplements, don't take the horse tranquilizer 10 milligram doses. Those are big, chunky doses of melatonin. And it's a lot of things. More is not often better.
Yeah, there's a Goldilocks spot, I like to call it. I feel like I'm gonna claim this term. I've been using it a lot recently. It's not too little, not too much. It's just right, just in the middle. The Goldilocks spot of melatonin. It's probably somewhere between say 1 and 3. So we're still kind of we definitely want to be careful. We know that it's working just as well at those low doses. 3
is that that upper threshold. So we went from 300 micrograms to 1 milligram, which we think is going to improve a little bit of the subjective feel, but be well under that sort of habit forming caution that people are concerned about with sleep aids.
And not only is there, with the very high doses, not only is there the danger of it being habit forming, but then also it's just diminishing returns as you get to high and high doses. It's not it works 10 times better and you're getting 10 times more of it. You're just kind of drowning out your body's kind of natural circadian rhythms for nothing, really.
Yeah. So excited about the new yawn. It's been something that that we've gotten a lot of feedback where people want more Yawn. They like the 10-pack is too little. So we're really proud of like the new month supply of Yawn that we're releasing. It'll be a great product and something that I'll be incorporating to a daily routine. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. I think it will be good for me, like having joined after you had the previous like NutriBox, being able to like make them exactly how I would want to take them has been great. So I hope that everyone else feels this, enjoys taking them as much as I'm looking forward to taking them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much else to be said here. I mean, I think a lot of work is going on behind the scenes always as we're talking to leading researchers, leading practitioners within, performance as well as on the recovery side. So excited to show off our work and show off our effort here.
Yeah, lots of learnings. And I think, hopefully that, through the discussion that we've had today, people can see that we think of the body as like a whole system. We've got to like be thoughtful about optimizing as much as we can. And I think that the human performance supplements are really targeting key areas where there are like problems, deficiencies, and areas in their life where people can really optimize to have a big, broad impact, across their health.
Cool. I think that's well said. So for customers, listeners, people that are excited to try some of these HVMN supplements, we're excited to hear your feedback. It's not just the work of Brianna and I. It's really the whole work of the entire team, where we have Chrissy, who runs supply chain, Mike Lee, who spent a lot of effort redesigning the packaging.
They look
to make
beautiful.
It even cooler when it's on your desk or on what's the bedside table? The bedside table. So I think it's not even just from the science side; it's also the whole experience. We want to make this something that's beautiful, that you can be proud of, that just fits into everything else in your lifestyle.
Yeah. So please keep in touch. Let us know what you think. And then also, I think, clearly we are listening to what you're saying, and your thoughts have gone into this update. So, I mean, I can't say when the next update will be, but if you have any feedback or thoughts or ingredients you think we should be looking at,
or new product
ideas, exactly. Yeah. So we want to give you guys like what you want. So just like feel free to reach out and reach out to care at, and often these emails get passed on to Jeff or myself, and we love reading your feedback, and we would love like a rabbit hole to dive down in terms of like product ideas and literature. So excited to
we literally have a channel hashtag happy customers, or just like customers and support, just to hear all the different feedback, and it's something that it's a highlight for all of us here. Thanks, Bri. Always great to chat.
As ever, Jeff.
Thanks for tuning in this week, everyone. As always, please send my producer Zil and I any feedback or topic or guest suggestions to podcast@hvmn.com. We read every single message and work really hard to make this program valuable and educational for you. Also, don't forget our ongoing special offer. By leaving a review on iTunes, you can get a 1-month supply of our new omega-3 product, Keto. Simply rate us with a written review on iTunes, screenshot it, and send it out to our email hotline. Again, that email is podcast@hvmn.com. Appreciate the love and support, and I'll see you again next week.